Hey, how's it going, everybody? Just wanted to let everybody know before we started the show. Right now, the book by Captain Rodino that we are covering today is Mindfully Intelligent, and it is out now. If you're interested, we'll leave a link in the description for where you can go and pick that up. Otherwise, if you're interested in trying to find out more about when we're releasing shows and following the cadets, find us on Facebook, Instagram, X, anywhere you can find social media. Our handle is at Army ROTC. I will turn it over to the show. Thank you. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Level Pack Podcast. Again, Captain Rodino is back with us. Sir, thank you again for being here. We did awesome on the last episode, and so letting those other soldiers hear more about what they can expect from their company commander in the future is absolutely huge for them. So, but like we sort of prefaced, was it like leading a company when you were a company commander in Two Fury?
Yeah, man. So one of the things I took to heart was that selfless service aspect, right? So again, much to my probably, very oftentimes I would put my organization and my people before my own needs. And more often than not, I was finding that, even at great kind of headache for myself career wise, right? Like I would very frequently stand up for what I believed was right by my people, by my organization, and would often go to bat, for causes and for justifications that like I saw a lot of peers like of mine kind of shy away from. I started to see when I was a lieutenant, I saw a culture very much that was like, hey, it doesn't matter who's in charge, you can always approach whoever's in charge with justification, logical justification. If you see a problem, you have a perspective, as long as it's feedback that's critical, right? Nobody likes someone who complains. If you're just whining to whine, that's very counterproductive. But if you're like, hey, from my foxhole, if you will, I see X, Y, or Z. When I was lieutenant, I saw that be received really well. I saw that be like kind of the standard. Hey, like even the BC would frequently be like, hey, as long as it's feedback and it's respectful and it's thoughtful, it's not like you don't come at your boss questioning them. It's just like, hey, I have something to present as feedback. And I realized that that's actually a skill that no one really talks about, is being that selfless servant leader and really weighing like, okay, hey, I got tough decisions to make, boss doesn't like it when you don't just say yes. And it's like, sometimes it's yes, but, or sometimes it's no, but. And so that is like a skill that I learned very quickly, that like, hey, you got to have the justifications for why something makes sense or why it doesn't make sense, right? Obviously, we all like to operate within the grounds of legal, moral, and ethical. And those are really good tools to kind of guide decision making. But sometimes, man, like, your subordinates come and approach you with a problem, and you really got to put your own needs on the back burner. I mean, to the degree where, like, when I was a company commander, man, I had a lot of injuries that I was working through. And it's like, I'm in the seat now. Like I have other people are looking to me to lead. So it's like, I got to put that stuff on the back burner. It wasn't, till like years later that I started getting things looked at, and they're like, whoa, you have all these issues. And it's because I was literally like, hey, I am here for everyone else but me right now. And I was very passionate about that because the Army they invested a lot in me. I did a lot of schools. I did a lot of awesome things. So being a selfless servant leader, especially as a company commander, was awesome because I got to see people grow. That was the coolest part. But with that, there are challenges. People have lives. People have issues with their life that they need, a little bit of empathy and understanding. It's very difficult to kind of balance mission and organizational priorities when, like, at the same time, it's like, I got to take care of my people. Like, they have to feel safe. They have to trust me, that they know that I'm going to put their needs before my own. And then also you have to be like courageous enough to like establish that with your people. You tell me when we were operating, I hope that if you told me you had a problem, you knew that once I understood that, I would do everything in my power to solve that for you. And if I couldn't solve it, I'd get you to where, that problem could be solved for you.
Yeah, exactly. Talk a little bit about that more. Where did you first sort of develop that? Was that basically when you were a lieutenant, seeing how your old organizations worked and how they took care of people? Because I feel like it's more of a learned thing. I mean, what do you believe on that? Do you believe that, as a leader, when you get this responsibility, do you, take care of yourself, or do you always like take care of your people? Like, what do you feel like people get that way?
Yeah, so like you have to balance the people, and you have to balance the mission and the organization too, right? Like sometimes battalion says, hey, need you to do this. that has ramifications for some people. And if some people don't have a situation that fits that mold, you have to be able to at least listen and find out more. And then sometimes you have to say, like, hey, like JRTC numbers are a big one, right? Like, hey, we need X amount of people have to go to JRTC. And it's like, okay, well, I got people for legit reasons, and so I have to be the guy that stands at the plate and says, hey, here's the justifications. And again, as long as you have the justifications, you have the reasons, I've always found that bosses will take that into consideration versus just identifying a problem. The biggest thing any boss hates, and then again, I've had very interesting relationships with all my bosses. I like to say there's been mutual respect both ways, but I've told my bosses things they didn't want to hear for sure. And so you never know when a soldier's going to come to you with a problem that's going to require you to kind of sacrifice a little bit more, right? Like, as a leader, even as a PL, right? Late nights, early mornings, you're running after trying to help people help themselves a lot.
Definitely. But more on that, I would say, where have you seen it go really well, I guess, for soldiers when leading, such as like when you're a company? Have you seen this payoff where a soldier comes to you with a problem, you're able to fix it, them taking care of themselves basically after that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I have guys that are like, hey, sir, I want to maybe do something with my career that's not very popular,
Mhm.
right? In the infantry, we like when in the infantry, we want everyone to be airborne and in the 82nd, and that's the only thing that matters, right? And it's like, well, no, some people want to go to PSYOPs, some people want to go to CA, some people want to do branch transferring. I've had soldiers come to me with a variety of different problems that have required me to really kind of look at what's been their best interest. A lot of people, if you talk to senior, officers and NCOs, they're going to be like, hey, 20-year career more, we want you in for the long game. Of course we do. But it's like, I've had soldiers that are like, hey, I'm here for different reasons than having a career. I've had people that are like, I'm here to serve my country, go to war, you know? And once that started to subside, I saw a lot of guys kind of weighing that, like, what am I really doing here anymore? So a lot of times I'd have a very frank conversation with people. I mean, we've had frank conversations about like, okay, hey, here's things that make sense, but it's like, it's your career, it's your life. So I can only offer that perspective. I can only help you get as far as I'm able to in my position for sure.
Okay. Talking a little bit more about, from leadership to sort of the disciplinary portion of like the army where things do happen, we don't always foresee them, such as soldiers getting article 15s and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like, leading a company where unforeseen problems like that come up, and what sort of things you've had like done?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, like two stories kind of come to mind. First one was specific because of the Article 15, right? So when I was an SFAB company commander, again, for context, I was a pre-KD captain. The SFABs, their company commanders are usually post-KD majors, so pretty big experience gap, right? He's in the position. Actually, I remember talking with my battalion commander at the time. He's like, hey, you're actually two out of the three company commanders I have. The other two were majors. So, like, doing okay, right? Even though I have things that stacked up against me. And I remember I had a soldier. He's an NCO. He's getting ready to, make that move from E6 to E7. And he was at a school that the SFAB requires us to go to, and he had an issue with the police and with potentially operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of drugs, right? So comes to me and he says, hey, sir, like I have this issue. I got, I had a light out. I had a beer or two, obviously nothing incredible. Cops pulled me over. So I'd been drinking. I was honest. Yeah, okay, not great, right? Like we don't love that. In the state of Georgia, they have a zero tolerance policy. So like, anything over 0.00, not good. So obviously not great, like not a good situation. Could have been way worse, right? But thankfully it wasn't. And so he approached me with this problem set because obviously he was at a school that we needed him to pass, and so that's not good. And so I had a lot of things going against us. And so again, you hear DUI, and the first thing that most people are thinking is going to be, hey, give him the book. That's about it. But I wanted to know, like, hey, what's the because the Army's a big place. There's a lot of different organizations, and there's a lot of choose your own adventure. There's a lot of different ways you can have an organization at certain echelons. So I asked for legal advice from our unit's legal representative, and his response was actually kind of incredible. He was like, well, this actually happens a decent amount. And so I said, okay, so the standard isn't just like, hey, give them the axe. What is it then? And he goes, well, in a lot of cases, you got to look at it holistically. Look at the soldier, look at their performance, look at, is there any patterns? Were they at a high risk person? Was there something that might have indicated this was a likely outcome? Because again, we're human. We all make mistakes. And again, that's not to say that like you can make a mistake and just walk freely. Punishment needs to be kind of done with the big picture. And so I brought this guy in. We had a couple of different conversations about how like this was not ideal. He put himself and he put me in a really bad position. And so what I wanted to do based on that situation is I was like, look, man, you're saying it's an accident, it's a one-time thing, all this stuff. So help me help you. So I told him I'm going to write a very objective statement because I didn't want to come off as being biased. Obviously, one of my guys, I want to vouch for him. But I told him I'm going to be pretty objective. I'm gonna write about what I've seen. A lot of initiative. He's done a lot of the Army's asked him. He's got an EIB. He hadn't gone to Ranger School, but he has aspirations. He's in a good spot to have a good career, and he's in a good spot to serve the Army. And my JAG consultant kind of mentioned the same thing. He goes, "Hey, you got to look at the big picture. Is it more of a detriment to the Army that we maybe limit this guy's career because of whatever factors?" I looked at everything pretty holistically, and I was of the mindset of like, hey, if he can generate a little bit bigger of a picture for himself on his quality, I think we can go a little easier on him in terms of the permanence. Like, let's make it permanent that he messed up. Let's adjudicate the issue, but let's not actually, maybe end his career over something like this. Because based on the JAG advice, they're like, hey, a lot of people he might have this DUI and never again have another issue with the Army. And again, we don't want to come off as like we're saying, hey, it's okay to mess up. But again, every case is different. So like getting a DUI is not the same across the board. So he said, take that into account, take that into effect. So this guy was able to produce a lot of good memorandums of character from previous units, previous officers, senior NCOs, and they all kind of resounded very similar to how I felt about this particular NCO. So like he had a lot of potential. They were all kind of sorry to hear that this happened, but they were all empathetic. Like we're all humans. We all make mistakes. And so basically it boiled down to like, did I believe this mistake was something he should pay for the rest of his life by altering his career? No. If the situation specifics would have been different, maybe. And while we're doing this in this process, because I'm the company level, so I'm kind of handling that. My battalion commander was like, "Hey, what's your opinion? What's your feedback?" And I said, "Well, here's all the letters that he got." I was like, "That's a lot of support for someone who did something that we all agree is not a good position to be in." And in the process, during this process, he actually ended up, the cops actually dropped the charges. And so they basically were like, hey, we don't actually have enough to pursue anything past this. But since it already become an issue with the Army, there's a little bit of resistance to like maybe also following in suit. My biggest issue was that like, hey, yes, he was accused of these things, but the legal system itself did not actually go through and say, hey, he is guilty of this. And so I felt like that was very important to take into account as well, because again, we are not professional law enforcement. We are not in the judicial systems. To a degree, it's like if the systems that we all have to respond to are not saying that this is a big enough issue that he can, be hit with something. I was like, hey, so like we can maybe dial it back a little bit. And again, I'm not saying the DUIs are acceptable. What I'm saying is that we're all human. And I think that I made the recommendation to some of the effect. I recommended a local general officer memorandum of reprimand, basically saying, hey, it's going to be on his file. If he messes up again, we have a pattern. Patterns indicate trends. And if it's trending in the wrong direction, we need to kind of cease, we need to do what's in his best interest and like say, hey, this is no longer working out for both of us. Let's get you to where you need to be based on the decisions you're making. That was not a very popular or opinion. That was not very well received. My chain of command actually decided, they're like, nope, we're going to give him the full effects. And I think he got a full GOMAR. I don't remember. And it was really unfortunate.
And what is a GOMAR, a general order of reprimand? Like, for everybody who really doesn't understand it, especially our young listeners, do you know anything about that? And does it follow?
I'll put it in layman's terms. Obviously, things update.
Yeah.
I've been in a position where I could kind of really directly work with this, but essentially, like a GOMAR is the Army's way of instituting a punishment that has some severity to it, right? So there's a local and then there's a permanent GOMAR. So a local GOMAR basically would indicate, hey, like Mike, you get a local GOMAR. That's going to go in your little file here while you're at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then once you PCS or once you go to a different unit, I can't remember the specifics, but essentially it's like after some time, this won't actually hurt you anymore. And again, which makes sense, right? You mess up, let's make a note of it. Let's make sure you're penalized according to it, but we all make mistakes. We're a little bit of redemption. A permanently filed one is one that gets filed, I believe, or directly to your IPERMs, or at least it was. And so basically, that's like, hey, it's on your record. Anyone can look at it, and it's kind of a forever thing that at some point is going to limit someone's ability to continue to progress in the Army, depending on need.
Okay,
so that's what I would say. That's kind of
does it keep junior enlisted? I mean, I can understand maybe for officers that it keeps us from rank, just everybody in general.
It can. It could be something you have to fight pretty significantly. Okay. Obviously, nobody likes to have GOMARs, and I've had a lot of soldiers kind of come to me at different points in their career saying like, hey, based on this previous thing, I'm having issues now. And so definitely in competition, you definitely don't want Definitely don't want to go more for yourself ever if you're you definitely aspire to have.
Right. And then like you said, soldiers fighting it. If a legal system like the police, like local municipalities, don't necessarily charge somebody with something, I kind of find it's very interesting that the army would then go through with the full sort of weight of something that wasn't 100% like. I find that interesting.
And
Is that
again,
just
it's
because
based on the chain of command of that
based on chain
person.
of command? Okay.
So like their disposition, because once the army is notified of an issue, it's up to the army to determine how they want to handle it. And yes, I agree. Frequently when I have soldiers that had issues with the law, like with tickets or what have you, like obviously we have to take a stance as well. But again, it's kind of based on the perception. In that particular case, they were like, "We don't care. We don't want this type of behavior," which but this is how we want to handle it. And I just felt like the long term benefits. I mean, you got to think, man, as someone being an E6 that's done a couple of schools, he's been in the army 6 to 10 years, that he has proven that he can get to a certain point. I'm not saying that the army is that difficult, right? But like that's a pretty important kind of step to being in the whole process. And so it's like if he can learn from this and he can become a better version of himself through this, it's like I felt like, hey, like we might be shooting ourselves in the foot from an organizational perspective because it's like we've all made mistakes. I mean, when I first was a lieutenant, we used to joke that like a DUI was a mandatory requirement for a first sergeant to have. And obviously that's not something that we want anyone to be acceptable with. But like that was kind of the joke because 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's kind of like the lower tier trenches worker way of being like, hey, this was what was acceptable. Now it's not. Obviously, over the last 20 years, things have changed. So, I kind of took all that into account, and I really did weigh on the advice of legal. Some of these things are you're gonna have gray areas that you lead in. Always look for expertise. Like anytime I had any issues like this, I always went to legal experts to kind of see what's going on. And I remember I actually had the second story I wanted to kind of tell you about. Very weird situation, right? So I have a service member, an E5. He's a jump master. Okay, comes to my office. So again, you remember I'm very approachable. I never wanted I didn't want to focus so much on who's bothering me, more so than like if someone's bothering me, there's a problem, right?
Did you have benefits or negatives generally with an open door policy?
Yeah. So
Or
I mean, at the
having
time,
that ability to have
yeah,
people
yeah.
come
So at
into
the
your
time,
office?
like an open door policy was kind of the Army's way of ensuring that, like, because we have a hierarchy and we have a chain of command, it's kind of the Army's way of making sure that, like, if someone's being wronged, if something is happening to someone that's illegal, immoral, or unethical, or even slightly there, it's kind of the Army system of being like, hey, you can go directly to your first line supervisor or your company commander, right? That's the intention of it. It's a good intention. Sometimes it gets misused, obviously. I mean, open door policy, like you have a troublemaking soldier, they frequently like, I want to use the open door policy because they try to weaponize it. In a lot of cases, I am understanding that. I do support, like anybody can come talk to me at any time. We do have a chain of command for a reason, because theoretically, I try to put as many problems between myself as a company commander and the problem as possible because I want them to get solved at the lowest echelon. It saves my organizational energy and saves my personal energy to then better be, allocated towards things that someone can't solve at my level, right? Actually, another story that was unrelated to what I was just about to tell you. I had a very junior E4 come into my office a couple months after taking command, and he's very upset. And I had heard rumors of this particular individual, not a very stellar soldier, a lot of excuses, a lot of weaponizing systems. And, so I was really kind of prepared, but I hadn't actually interacted with him yet because, again, unfortunately, some people do use the systems against the system, and it's unfortunate. And so he comes to my office and he starts explaining to me about how basically the whole world only spins because he's holding it up on his shoulders. And I'm like, hey, hold on real quick. Like, what's your role in the organization? He's like, well, I'm an assistant supply sergeant. I'm like, okay. So I feel like we're being a little dramatic with some of the things that we're saying, but okay, I'm going to listen to you. So, he told me, and essentially what it boiled down to is that, we were holding him accountable under the previous regime. Like, my predecessor had a lot of things that he was worried about that had nothing to do with this guy. And so this guy was getting away with a lot of stuff. When I came in, I was like, absolutely not. Like, we're going to hold people to the same standards. I let him know, like, hey, I don't see anything wrong with what's, being done. Like, I believe the issue all started because he was being held accountable to a time and a place standard. So I told him, hey, I'm not telling you can't go to your appointments. I'm not telling you that you can't seek the treatments that you need and the care that you need. And I'm here for you. But that doesn't preclude you from following the rules like everybody else. And I mean, this guy caused like endless amounts of problems from that point on until I believe at some point we moved him somewhere else. But there's no right answer for some of this stuff. Like there's answers that people can all agree that's not not the way I would have done it, or it's probably not the way it should have been done, but there's not anyone that's gonna be like, this is exactly how you solve that problem. Unlike a skill level 1 task, there's no FM or manual that says, well, when you have a soldier that's weaponizing the systems, this is what you do. It's like, no, you have to rely on your experience, and even more so, rely on the experience of others. Like my first sergeant was a super awesome wealth of knowledge that I always was constantly, hey, first sergeant, bouncing off of stuff. Again, I'm the one that makes the decision, because that's the beauty of the Army system, is that they pair an officer up until basically battalion command. That's when you see, battalion commander and battalion command sergeant major. They actually have very similar experience at that point. Everywhere else, they pair us with an NCO because they like the way that they've taught us to think, but they know, hey, we need somebody who actually has been around a lot longer that can advise us. And that's why, like, I always called my first sergeant the senior enlisted advisor of the company, because he was truthfully my kind of grounding foundation for which I ran everything through, because he's been around longer. And so even though I'm the one signing all the important stuff and I got the assumption of command, like, you got to empower those people to be in your corner, and kind of give you the input. And you have to also kind of set up the situation so that they know, hey, if I don't agree with what you're saying, it's not that I didn't listen to you. It's that I'm still the boss. And I think, we talked very similarly in your initial counseling. Like, I want you to be able to tell me your exact thoughts, because I never liked when my bosses kind of made me feel like if I tell them my opinion, they're going to not like me because of it, right? Because again, I have some opinions. So with that in place, and a lot of time, more often than not, if I hit up my senior NCO at any point in my career, I would let them know, like, I'm going to take your opinion into account. But if I choose to go a different direction, I still need that support. And depending on the talent of the NCO, most oftentimes we ended up doing exactly what the NCO wanted. And sometimes, especially with my my last company, First Sergeant Purvis, sometimes I'd be like, all right, bro, like, you're the smart man and I love you to death, but we're going to try it Captain Rodino's way this time. And then he'd be like, let's see how it works. Sometimes it worked out. Sometimes he'd be like, yeah, see, and it'd be like, okay, good learning point. Just depends on what it is that we're, talking.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that? Like something you thought was going to go well, and did you back it up with anything? First sergeant disagreed because that's not how it worked.
I'm trying to think. So when I was a PL, we had an issue with one of our subordinates. He just didn't seem to really want to be there. Like, his performance was lacking. He was an E6, should be awesome. And I had the E4s that were running circles around him. And I remember I did have a first sergeant where we were telling him, like, hey, like, this guy's not performing. Like, I asked him, hey, do you even want to be in the infantry? And he's like, no, I think I want to be in the aviation. Okay. So it's like, well, I got a guy that's not performing. He's openly telling me he doesn't want to be here. Like, I feel like we could, maybe do something. And that particular instance actually got, like, it got kind of blown out of proportion. So again, my senior NCO was a little bit more junior than normal, but again, like, we were trying to get after it. He was doing the best he could. And I remember he actually ended up, he asked for guidance from our sergeant major at the time. And our sergeant major, he's like, oh, let me see the counseling packet. And I was the type of second lieutenant that, like, put things on paper all the time. So we had a pretty extensive packet for this guy. And again, I did that for everybody. So it wasn't like it was just him. And it ended up blowing up into this thing where I had to meet with the battalion commander and the sergeant major and my company commander and my company first sergeant. And they're like, why do you got a problem with this guy? And I'm like, well, here's why. Look at these counselings. We were doing squad live fires, and I got another squad where I got an E4 that's in charge because my squad leader went home early, and he's crushing it. Like, he's doing all the things. And I said, so it's performance based, it's administrative based. I mean, we had issues with pieces of a weapon being, unaccounted for some time. And I was like, these are all things that, like, not all of us can agree are not great things. And it ended up getting to the point where my battalion commander was, like, kind of grilling me on, like, well, oh, how could you, you don't ever say good things about him. And I'm like, well, here, counseling 1, 4, 7, well, what about when you follow up? Do you ever follow up? Yes. 1, 2, 3, here's the, and then he, like, midway through, like, kind of chewing me out, he's like, this is actually really detailed counseling. And it was really solid. I actually never counseled my platoon sergeant this good. He's like, do you ever counsel your squad leaders like this? And they're like, no, sir. He's like, this is actually really good. But F you, and it's like, I'm like, and again, that was one of those times where, like, for me personally, like, I had no issues with standing on what I knew was my moral high ground. Like, hey, this is making me look bad. I'm getting chewed out. My platoon sergeant standing next to me, like, shut the hell up, sir, like, pulling on my thing. And I'm like, no, listen, like, the guy's, it's objective. I'm doing the system. Like, you don't want to look bad because he's not performing. I get that. But that's a different issue. And so basically, I was taught very early on, you have to have the justification for what you want done. Still might not be accepted, but the reception will be a lot. I'm sure if I had less actual reasons for what I wanted, that interaction, that chain of events,
Mhm.
all then probably would have turned out much differently.
Talking about counselings, you know, that is always that's always a thing, especially when you have so much work to do, especially in the when things were always there's always something more important or something needs to get done. How did you find time? Did you just block it off on a calendar and said, you know, this day of the week's my counseling day? Like
Yep.
that's what we're gonna do.
So counseling is actually a beautiful thing. The Army has gotten like so well. They did it so well. The problem is obviously time. And I know, like, I counseled everybody that required counseling. I tried to, I mean, I get like, I mean, you remember, I like to have conversations with all my people. So even though I knew time was like the essence, I still put in scheduling time on my calendar to sit down. I don't know if you remember, but like I'd have you come in and I'd close the damn door because
Right.
nothing's going to bother us while we're talking. Obviously, people opened the door and bothered us, but at least the intention was there, right? And so, yes, you have to carve out that time. And counseling is an awesome, awesome sociological function because it truly allows you to open the channel for communication. An initial counseling sets expectations depending on how you do it, right? So, like when I was younger, my counseling was very simple. It was kind of like, I was focused on things that PL should be focused on, right? Like teamwork, lethality, and I can't remember what the other one was, but basically, like, that was what I was all about as a lieutenant. And then I had some experiences with some people where it's like if I didn't counsel them on certain stuff, I had a harder time counseling them when they were failing to perform. So my counseling kind of grew. And so then I realized I need to include some of the standardized expectations, right? Because I remember I had a first sergeant and we were having an issue with an NCO, and he's like, well, you didn't counsel her on her job specifics and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, it's common knowledge. And he's like, yes, but you have to take the time to put it in writing. And so then I augmented my counseling to basically, when I was in the SFAB specifically, I got a lot of this knowledge kind of thrown at me. And so when I would sit you down as like my supply sergeant, for example, I would have, hey, this is what the Army, this is 7-22. This is what the Army says is, an E6 is responsible for. And then this is what the Army says based on your MOS. You're supposed to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And so basically, like, I listed in short form, like, hey, this is why I have these expectations. And I got a lot of good reviews when I had soldiers in hot water that I'm like, hey, they're failing to reform. I've had sergeant majors pull me aside and be like, dude, I have never seen a CO counsel someone with an 11-page document before. They're like, this is unheard of. Like, your counseling spot on. More oftentimes than not, they'd also on the side have a conversation about like, well, it looks bad if we kick this person out. And I'm like, well, I don't think having a standard should look bad. I think having a standard should be something we should all emulate to. So, but yes, definitely initial counselings are huge because it's that marker, right? Like, I mean, we were very busy and I still made sure that I had time for my PLs. I made sure I had time for my platoon sergeants. I made sure I had time for my staff sections, right? I tried to make a lot of time for other people. I mean, I started incorporating the squad leaders because I wanted to have that effect 2 levels down,
Mhm.
So yeah, it is very important. And it's going to be something that a lot, especially for the cadets or younger kind of guys that are looking at this stuff, you got to fight for that time that you spend it. Even if it's like on the move, even if it's not as ideal as like sitting down and having a conversation like you and I are, spend the deliberate time to let your people know, like, hey, here's how I expect you to think of me. Here's how I expect you to act. And then truthfully, like trust runs everything, especially in the Army, right? Like, you have to have a solid foundation of trust. You got to make sure that your people trust you as much as you can trust them.
Definitely. More on, you know, solving problems in the Army. Have you ever had anybody in a company or a platoon where you had to move them around in order to get a better effect from them to see better job performance or
Yes. Yeah. So I don't remember when you joined the company, had we done that selection that we ran, or was that after?
it was before, months before. But I
Okay,
know
so
what you're talking about. I heard about this.
yeah, this is awesome. So again, I had an awesome first sergeant who supported he supported 99% of my endeavors in energy and spirit, and then supported about 90% of them in actuality. Sometimes I just had wild ideas, and even he was like, sir, no. So ironically enough, and I talk about this in my book, right? One of the things that one of the models I wanted to present was that we all produce value in the situation that we're in. And based on that, you're going to be perceived one way or the other. And for a leader, like, am I able to do my job? Do I cause you issues because I'm not? That's value, right? Like, I get the position because I did all the things, but like, once I'm in the position, how do I generate value? Because that's important, right? Like, if you haven't yet, you will work for a boss where you're like, wow, like, yep, I respect this guy because of his rank and I get it, but it's like, this guy is making it so much harder than it has to be. Okay. And so one of the things I noticed, and I talk about this at length in my book, was that like first thing I realized was that the environment was not engineered the way I wanted it to be. And so I moved all the stuff around. I made a combative little fight house in my, company cough and a training area. Because prior to that, it was the hookah lounge. They were just feet up, vaping, and it's like, this does not occur here. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm the last person on planet Earth. You remember, if we didn't have work to do, go the hell home, because I need you doing whatever it is that you do at home so that you can be right in the head for when you get to work. So first thing was the environment. I had to reorganize that. Then I started to see the trends. So for Deco, at least, people were really situated. Like first platoon had all this historic crap, and second platoon had their own little thing, and third platoon and fourth platoon, we always do this. And so First Sergeant and I were looking at this, and we're looking at the talent in our organization, and we are like, we need to shake some stuff up. Like there's just too much reliance on like, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we do it. And it's like, no. This is how we as a collective do this now. So we came up with a system. We were going to do based on talent, assessment. We came up with a couple of different modules. There was like a written exam, there was a physical portion, and then we came up with we called it the violence of action assessment, the Bob drill, where we had that little dummy that looks like a man, and you'd come up to me and I'd be like, this is Bob, he's going to kill you right now. And then I would just look at you and I would just see how you reacted, because we wanted to see, it was a violence of action assessment. So we were like, if I tell you you're in danger, how do you respond? Some people would be like, and then they need a little nudging. Some people would just attack the dummy in the weirdest way possible. But it was great. Everyone had a good time, and it gave us some data to look at, right? So we now had most people didn't do very well in the written exam, and it's like, okay, great. The physical exam, so we got everyone in a room. We said, this is how everyone did. And so at that point, we had mixed up the PLs and platoon sergeants because we wanted that energy to change. We wanted to kind of see how do people react when they get, kind of a new person. And that's good to a degree. And there was a lot of kickback because it requires more work now. Now people are uncomfortable. And I get that. And I remember I told everyone, it's okay. Just, let the process, just let's see if it'll work out. And I remember, so we're about to go do gunnery, and we got all new crews. We got all new this. And I'm like, that was the point. So we did all that prior to people getting ready to do collective stuff, because we wanted new teams. We wanted new kind of relationships to form. And then what we saw was, once we physically changed the environment and we socially changed the environment, then we started to see the effects we wanted. Then we started to see, hey, Mike, he can't be Mr. Lazy Gunner anymore, because his driver, he's known for 5 years, and his TC, he's known for 6, and he's never done anything better because he's never had someone who's ever wanted anything more than just being a good gunner. Now we got, Mike the gunner, and he's got a whole new crew. He's got to work harder to earn their trust. And then 2, he's got to figure out a new system, right? And this kind of methodology, there's a lot of performance psychology that goes into that. There's a lot of neuroscience that goes into that. If you're not constantly evolving, you plateau. And so that's what I was seeing. I was seeing a plateau, and we kind of redid everything. And after kind of when I redid the physical environment, a lot of people were complaining about that at first. They started to see okay, hey, this makes sense,
Yeah, definitely. That's all really amazing stuff. And that makes sense. Just because, by shaping up that environment, or not the environment, but putting new tests in front of people. I heard about that before I came in and while I was in the company, but I don't know if any other company does anything like that. Just because, I imagine that basically as a private, coming to a unit, natural progression, I'm just in that platoon until, maybe I'm a sergeant or staff sergeant and they move me to another platoon, maybe. Is that generally how it goes? Not necessarily stagnation, but, we try to push people to schools, and then that's the best way you could sort of get somebody to evolve.
Yeah. So what we noticed is there was a lot of historical relationships that were being leveraged to get out of doing, out of growing, right? So first platoon has been like this because first platoon knows everybody. Well, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to challenge people, make them uncomfortable and have to adapt to that challenge. But I also wanted the overall teamwork of the whole organization to improve, because there was still a lot of this, well, first platoon did the right thing, second platoon, they're doing whatever, third platoon isn't so great, fourth platoon thinks they're cool. I was like, I need to get rid of that. So part of shaking it up was also hey, if Mike was friends with, Joey and Snuffy and Will, but I moved them to 3 different platoons. Now I know Mike is still buddies with his other 3 buddies, but they're in different platoons. So now there's going to be crosstalk. Because one of the things I kept on trying to explain to them was like, yes, have pride in like where you fall in your social hierarchy. But remember, we're all on the same team. Like at the end of the day, when I go up to battalion, I'm the face of us. And so while I love, that first platoon's doing this and second platoon's doing this, third and fourth are doing this, I still want you guys to help each other out, because at the end of the day, our weakest link is still going to be a hindrance on all of us. And I think that worked out. I started to see problem solving happen, where the platoons were helping each other out, because now if I got privates that know each other across the board, if one is doing something weird in one platoon, they're asking their buddies, what are you guys doing? And that talk goes up, and then that talk up goes across. And so now what I was trying to do with that was kind of see, hey, like move people around the organization so they really feel bought in. And so we kind of took those previous ties, broke them apart, and expanded them so that something new could develop. And I think something kind of awesome really actually happened because of it.
Yeah, especially with the best squad. So of our members basically go all the way up with the rest of the battalion's people, all the way up to division.
Yes.
Even
Yeah.
division.
Yeah, because it's talent management. Yeah, because we put
Right.
a lot of talented individuals on one team. I will say the reason why you don't probably see what Purvis and I did a lot is because it did take a lot of our time, man. On top of all the other crap that like I had to do, now Purvis and I were like, okay, we will now like write this big check that's going to take us a lot more time. Like I had to spend countless hours. Like him and I came up with a new way that we were going to assess people, and then we had to make sure that the standards made sense. And there's a lot of quality assurance and quality control stuff that had to happen. So I would say that's probably why a lot of change doesn't happen, is because you got to make calls at where you're sitting. And so I made the decision that like this was going to have long-term benefits. So like, let's do it. And it definitely took a lot more energy out of us. But again, I mean, some people might just be more willing to, if I'm just here in the position and I know I only have a year and a half, I got to survive until my career keeps going. If that's what's motivating me, I'm probably going to let some of the stuff slide, because that's the difference between a selfless servant leader versus someone who's maybe interested in other things. Is it like, they're going to do also what's easiest for them that's going to keep the train going the way I was like, no, I care about you guys. I don't care about where I'm going to go afterwards. I'll be fine. I'll figure that out.
And then sort of going back to what we were discussing earlier, what other times have you had maybe a soldier screw up and you were able to help them out?
So what I would offer, I saw the culture changing a little bit. The other thing I wanted to kind of address with this before I tell you, I got a good story.
Yeah.
I never really understood. I had peers, and I would have instances where, like, I'm a company commander. I'm in charge of in a deco. You got like 80-something people in a rifle company. You got like 130-something if you're fully staffed. Private whoever going off and being an idiot Friday night, right? Got it. Nobody wants that to happen. I'm not saying yes, but it's going to happen. Okay. I never overreacted to like one of my privates messing up. Statistically going to happen based on the culture we know, right? What I saw a lot of people doing is that they would take it personally and think like, well, this makes me look bad, or this reflects poorly on me. And it's like, does it? Like, do you really have that level of control to where like 80-something people, you think that anything you're going to do is going to maybe decisively keep them out of trouble? Like, maybe. I hope that by kind of giving you guys entity to also identify with, to forging new, relationship bonds, that like you guys would help each other out. And I don't know if you remember, but I used to tell each other all the time, it's a demon company world. Everyone else is just living in it. That was designed so that there was, you guys naturally protect each other. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be some outlying behavior. And so it's like, I never had an issue with being like, hey, Private Mike, he messed up. He messed up pretty big today. And a lot of bosses would be like, well, what are you doing? And why? This is a reflection on you. And it's like, well, is it? Or do I just have like young guys that sometimes make some bad decisions over a holiday? It is what it is. I'm not going to get emotional about it. I'm going to deal with it. But I started to see that cultural shift where it's like, they don't want to report up bad news because it's like, it looks somehow bad on me, but it's like, we're the Army. We're a smaller subsect of a larger population. We're going to have some of the same problems, and so one particular instance this happened, it was pretty funny overall. It's unfortunate also in a lot of ways. I had a young guy, so the E5, he comes to me and he's a jump master. So I'm not sure if he thought maybe because we were jump masters that he had like some kind of bond that he could just like come up to my office and be like, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if his PL platoon sergeant even knew he was doing that. I don't know if it just was a fear reaction, but essentially he comes to my door and I'm in the middle of it's like right before lunch. I have so much I have to do before I'm not eating lunch. And then I have a meeting that's going to take the rest of my afternoon up. So my day is booked. I'm already like, I'm at home tonight already in my mind. And he comes to me and he's got a problem. And he explains to me this problem. Sir, I have this meeting. We have to go. I need you to be there with me. And I'm like, okay, listen, I don't just work for whoever tells me what to do. Like, what are you talking about? Give me this situation. Well, so long story short, in a brief instance, he's like, well, I mean, I was speeding. Technically, it was on post, but it was outside of post. I had to do it so I didn't, cause an accident. They revoked my driving privileges. This is some kind of meeting to adjudicate this. And I'd been familiar with this policy. Like, I mean, the installation was trying to crack down on speeding on post, and safety was the priority. And I get all that. But so he had this problem. He's like, I need to be able to reinstate my driving privileges. So now I got an E5 that's like emotional in my office. He can't even go to this meeting because he's not allowed to drive on post, even though I don't really know what authority, I mean, he still had his license. He was still a licensed driver in the United States, but okay, we're going to make up rules. So I'm like, all right, man, let's go. And I'm like, get in my car. We drive over there. And then I don't know who we're meeting. I don't really know why, but we get there and this guy's late. And so I'm like, well, this is cool. Like, look at all this. Like, I'm like, phone is blowing up. Things need to get done. But I'm like, none of that's important because I got to do that as a problem. And he says, I need to be the one that solves that problem. So here I am. And so basically this colonel, he walks in and I didn't know who he was. He was in charge of the whole post. My buddies all kind of joke, there's a lot of extra colonels and extra generals and a lot of extra people that just have to have a job. So I assume that's probably what was going on here. And so it's this colonel and this cop. And I'm like, why is there a cop here? I'm like, it's just me and this guy, right? So they're like, well, we're here to adjudicate whether or not, you have driving privileges on post, and we're going to talk about the event and all stuff. And I'm like, well, why did this guy get like legal counsel? Why is like this guy not prepared for this? Like, why is he just now coming to me telling me I have to be here for this? And so then it opens up, and they're basically playing bad cop, bad cop. They're like, well, tell us about the event. And I had never actually heard the whole story. And so what it sounds like is he was riding a motorcycle. It's right there, Army people, motorcycles. Oh my goodness. Risk. Okay. Rightfully so. A lot of accidents do happen. He's getting onto a highway. There's a semi truck that's not slowing down. And so in order for him to not get like completely demolished by the semi truck, he speeds up to get into the flow of traffic, and he ends up breaking the speed limit by like a decent amount. I think like 10 or 15 miles, which again, not saying that that's a good thing. Not saying that we want that. Okay, but I understand. I'm like, oh, I've ridden a motorcycle. If you ride a motorcycle, you know that like there are certain things you have to pay attention to, and obviously how much you're speeding in order to get out of an unsafe, kind of situation is going to be a lot lower on the priority. Like priorities like do not get hit, let's not cause an accident. Okay. So we're there and I'm listening to this and they're bad cop again. Well, you should have done this. You could have done that. Why were you doing this? Why didn't you do that? And I'm like, well, obviously hindsight is 2020. It's a lot easier. The guy was making a judgment call. He made a call. I've been to courses that have taught me offensive and defensive driving. At no point in that course were they ever like, yeah, you should really worry about the speed limit when you're trying not to be killed by somebody with with a motorized vehicle. It's like, no, get out of danger. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, this is going poorly. Like I'm watching this kid, he's about to walk up to the gallows and they're just going to hang him for him. And so then finally bad cop gets over and the colonel looks at me and he goes, well, what do you think there, Captain? Like as if I'm just going to be like, oh yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's like, okay, you asked me, so here's my opinion. And I said, well, sir, I'm a company commander. I'm in charge of about 82 people. I got a lot that I have to take care of. This service member here approached me. He's got an issue. So obviously I got to drop everything to kind of be there for him. I was like, I don't think we're really looking at the effects of this policy holistically. I said, this is costing me like over an hour and a half of my time when like the Army has entrusted me with a lot more important things to worry about than whether or not this guy can, one, drive places, and then two, dealing with the nuances of that. And so I said, I'm just going to offer for the perspective that maybe like, we're looking at this from the wrong angle. It sounds like although what he did was wrong, it was justifiable based on the context. And I think a little bit of empathy should be kind of afforded to this guy when it comes to penalizing him. Should he be punished? Absolutely. He did something wrong. Should we like make it this big of a deal? I don't think so. I think there's other methods. So he asked, he's like, well, what kind of methods? And I said, well, back in the day, a couple years ago when I was a lieutenant, I had guys do the same thing. This has not changed. Like, speeding is a human thing until we figure out something else. And so I was like, yeah, we used to make them go to like weekend classes, like take their time away. Education is good to, kind of help problems. We want people to be aware of things so they can make informed decisions. So I was like, let's make him go to a couple weekend driving classes. Let's take his time. Let's make him understand that like, yes, you were in a bad position, but like, the way you handled it wasn't important or wasn't, wasn't the best way to go about it. But like, I was like, based on this, like, we're making him a super huge cost. And I'm not to mention that he's a jump master. He needs to drive. He has to drive to pack sheds and drive to drop zones and drive to places. I'm like, this guy, like, he's an adult. Like, we can't limit his ability to get to work and be a productive member. So for whatever that's worth, I do think that like we need to come up with a different solution for this guy, because like I don't think that based on the situation. I even told him, I was like, do you ride motorcycles? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, wouldn't you've done the same thing? I know I've definitely sped in front of a semi truck to not get run over. And again, we don't love speeding, but the last thing I'm doing is looking down at my speedometer when I'm like about to be flattened. So I'm like, I can be a little empathetic. Like, let's get him a punishment that makes sense. And then if he does it again, yeah, patter. Okay, cool. You're not going to listen? Then figure it out. I have no empathy for you past that. Well, that did not get received well at all. I could see this guy's face. I'm reading the room, and he's like, oh, great. So now I got this captain that's mouthing off me. Like, no, but okay. And so he goes, all right, well, step outside and we're going to talk. And I'm like, oh, so this is going terribly. So we step outside, and the guy's, again, you visibly distressed, very emotional, verge of tears. Like, and again, I guess for weeks, this guy has been like Uber Eatsing because, again, I don't know why he didn't go to the DFAC, but he's like, people are getting mad at him because he's always like, I need a ride. And everyone's like, I'm tired of driving you around. Again, we're all adults. What the heck? And so I said, hey, look, I didn't know what we were getting into. I do apologize. I'm only working with what you gave me and the time you were giving it to me. So I don't think we have a lot of options. I was like, best case scenario, I don't think you did a very good job of like kind of explaining that the alternative to you behaving different would have been better, right? Like, it sounds like you either would have gotten hit or you would have caused some kind of major accident. And so it seems like even though you did the wrong thing, it was for the right reason. So I think like you need to just clarify that with them and just make the case that like you did mess up, but it was justifiable and here's why, and see if they'll maybe lighten it up a little. So we go back in and they're getting ready to read him his rights and just send him to the executioner. And he blurts out something like, well, sir, did you want me to die? And then immediately they're both like, whoa, whoa. They start backpedaling to get red in the face. And I'm like, that is not the delivery. But like, okay, like the guy's a young E5. Like, I get it, and he's emotional. Like, I would be upset too. I'm upset that I'm here. And again, and to his point, I still think safety is a primary concern. I just don't think in this case that being a bonehead about it makes any sense. And so they start backpedaling, and they're like, "Well, we're not saying that." And he's like, and this kid was listening to me and then listening to things I said. And so then he's like, "Well, sure. I mean, it seems like I was about to get into an accident, or they were about to cause an accident." So, and he's like, "And it's not even on post. Like, it's outside of post." So they basically explained it away with, well, safety is everyone's primary concern, and you broke this policy, and so here's the policy. And so they were like, don't worry, you can still drive military vehicles for training. And I'm like, what sense does that make? We're okay with him driving a military training vehicle because we don't want to affect our readiness levels, but then we have no issues with telling this guy you can't be an adult. Like, what? And so, and again, I explained to him, I said, this is going to have some unintended secondary and tertiary, effects. Not a couple months later, some poor, captain, I think he was in like a signal shop somewhere. He's scooting to work because he can't drive to work now. And I think he got schwacked. And it's like, that's, we're okay with that? Okay. So this is a gray area, right? Like, this leadership happens in the gray. Sometimes there are not easy kind of options. That's why you always have to have some justification. So I gave him mine and he wasn't very happy with it. So he let us go. And ironically, this particular jump master and I had a duty we had to go to. So I drove him to that. Again, so his company commander is driving him to something so that he can serve the Army. Great. And as I'm getting ready to load the airplane, he's already on the airplane. Luckily, it was low cost, low altitude LCLA drop. So we were just pushing out some makeshift bundles out of door just to get some proficiency. And I get a call from my boss. He's pissed. And he's like, you and so need to get your asses to my office right now. I don't care what you're doing. And I'm like, hey, roger that, sir. I'm standing on the ramp of a C-130 Juliet. Do you want me to go get him? And do you want us to come back? Just so you know, we both need this for currency for this upcoming BMTW, whatever the hell we're doing. Whatever you want, sir, you just tell me. Well, do the duty, come to my office afterwards. Okay, so not that big of a deal, clearly. So we do the duty, we get back, we get done, we go back. And luckily, we stop at the company, and my first sergeant picked up on it one way or the other. I don't know if it was because of the way I was or if he had heard some things, but he sees me and he goes, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm about to go get slaughtered. So I don't really know why, but I can explain on the way. He's like, I need to come with you. I said, sure. So he comes, and again, they wanted me and this guy, probably to figure out what happened. And so we get, we go to the office, and it's me, my first sergeant, this guy, my boss, and the sergeant major. So now, again, you got to take some things into account, right? So I knew we were headed into some hot water, but I didn't know what we were going to actually be getting into. So we get there and a little more formal. So, I'm like, I tell the guy, hey, attention, We're not like getting an award right now. Stand at attention. BC's like, hey, relax. What in the heck's going on? I just got a call from this guy. Again, I didn't know who he was because this sounds like a made up job, but he's really upset and all this stuff. And flat on the back, he says, well, a captain was mouthing off to him and an E5 was disrespecting. And I said, hold on, sir, I got to stop you right there. That's not what happened. I explained what happened. And I said, I understand that this guy's like irritated, but at the end of the day, I was right there. He didn't say any of this to me. So I don't know why he's calling you. I don't know why he's making this a bigger deal. He is a colonel. He could have addressed it directly with me. So it actually starts to get heated, this discussion. Again, I got an E5 sitting right next to me who's got his entire chain of command. Not the right venue for this, right? Like, I don't know why you think yelling at the company commander in front of his E5 is going to change anything. If you got the story, kick the E5 out and then yell at the company commander if that's the thing, right? So he starts trying to yell. And at this point, like I said, I'm a selfless servant leader. I know that, and when I'm about to open my mouth up and what I have to say is going to make my boss get aggressive towards me. But again, it's my guy. I'm taking care of him. I don't think that he should be treated this way, and I don't think it's right. And so I tell him, we're going back and forth. The NCOs in the room are getting really uncomfortable because, again, this is not like most captains just nod their head and say yes. And it's like, well, I'm going to give you the feedback you're asking, so keep asking me and I'm going to keep talking. So finally we kick out the E5 because this is getting awkward. We're like basically screaming at each other. The NCOs in the room are like concerned because I'm screaming at my boss. This doesn't normally happen. So finally we kick out the NCOs because we're not making any headway. And my boss and I had like a pretty candid discussion. He's like, well, what the heck? How are you going to tell him this? It's not about the policy. It's about the fact that he was in trouble. And I told him, I said, sir, I explained you what happened. This kid, he made a mistake, but the alternative sounded a lot worse. And I said, he's one of my guys. We train, we go to war. Like, I need this guy to know that I have his back. He's got my back. And I said, in the grand scheme of things, like, he asked me for my opinion. I gave it to him. And he was like, well, now your name's out there. They're all going to know you and all this other problems. And I'm like, if that's how I got to be known, then sure. Like, and later on, he ended up telling me, he goes, you are one of the only guys I've ever seen that will fight tooth and nail for his people. And he goes, that's honestly a big strength of yours, but it's also a weakness because you rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I was like, well, I was taught remember we talked earlier, like, I was taught that, like, if you have a perspective and you have justification, like, just say it. I mean, at no point did I ever tell him I'm going to go crazy, run off the rails and start doing whatever I wanted. But you asked me my opinion, I'm going to give it to you. And so that was an interesting kind of like chain of events where I was like, this is a lack of like people reading the room. Like back when we got my little guy in this room and he's emotional and telling him what's going on. Like, these leaders here, they're not looking at the bigger picture. They're just like, well, somebody broke, he was feeding and it was on post technically. So this policy is the go-to. And there's no thinking past that. And again, some leaders like that make sense. Like, yep, he broke the policy, so give him the book. But I've just seen leaders read between the lines a little more and be a little more empathetic and like truly just weigh the risks and understand it. Like, we're not just talking about making some kind of decision here about this guy's driving privileges. Like, we're talking about truly altering this guy's life. Because it was weeks after this guy's coming to me telling me, I'm running out of money. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm sorry, bro, we fought the good fight. I can only tell you to keep rebuttaling this so much, but before you did speed. I don't know what else to tell you.
Right. Obviously, speeding is wrong. Speeding is illegal. Have you seen it in other ways where people have been able to influence the situation because of the evidence you have? Or does it have to be, it is kind of interesting that,
what I offer you that right now
don't take
place. And as we've kind of talked, there's a lot of variability, right? Like, just because we're all in Army, the 82nd is a lot different than 3rd ID. 82nd is a lot different than 1st Army, if we're just going to use my anecdotal experiences, right? Oh, Army's a huge place. And again, like I mentioned kind of before, it does boil down, like, as a commander in the Army, you do have a lot of privileges. And that's where like the selfless service thing comes into account. Like, you really got to understand the gravity of that. Like, you make decisions that have effects on people's livelihood. And I've seen like some of my peers and some of my bosses, they make decisions based on like, I need to protect me and my career. Okay, that is a way for sure. It wasn't the way that I went about it. What I'd offer,
like, how does it hurt somebody?
To you guys, my lieutenants, right? You guys would come to me and say, "Sir, we want to do this, we want to do that, blah blah blah," and I would give you justifications. What I try to never do is tell you, you're going to do it the way I told you to do it because I'm the boss, right? I can't stand that type of logic, and I think very rarely did I ever actually have to do that. I would show you, hey, you have this idea. Have you thought through it? Because clearly, through the discussion, maybe not. And so if you think through it like that, yeah, here's the justification as to why we're not going to do that. But I taught you guys this, and I started seeing you guys use it almost against me. I don't know if you remember, but one of your peers, he really wanted to do a tow range, right? This is like, I was like, okay, I have zero issues. It's an advanced level of training. It doesn't happen frequently. It requires special ammunition, special reservations. So I told him, I said, I'm not saying no. What I'm telling you is that here is the laundry list of things I know needs to happen. I'm sure there's a laundry list of things I don't know that needs to happen. Okay, so now we have this thing, right? There's a lot of challenges here. So I was like, I'm going to empower you. If you check off all this stuff, because I told him straight up, based on all the stuff I have going on, I can't give you too much energy into this, but what I can do is empower you to do so. And so he just wouldn't drop it. So I just kept on giving him, okay, well, do what needs to get done and we'll do it. And so this little crazy guy goes and gets everything lined up. And I got the 3 calling me, are you sure you want this? And I said, hey, sir, like he's requesting, he's doing all the things right. Yep, let's do it. And it got to the point where he lined up all the boxes, he checked them all off, got them all green. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do this now because you've done what needs to happen. And so I watched you guys kind of learn this methodology and provide me the justification for things. And again, only on a couple instances past that did we actually have some good discussions where like I could see you guys had the justification for why you wanted to do something and then you just lacked the experience. There were a few times where you guys wanted to do some stuff where I was like, I love it. But because I can't really articulate why this is risky and I can't show you, I'm going to tell you like, hey, we're not going to do it. Here's some of the reasoning, but like just this is one of those times where it's like, all right, you do have to kind of just listen and rely on my experience. Because there were some things that like some of your peers wanted to do that I like wanted to support, but they weren't able to get it to where the justifications allowed for that support.
Definitely. Have you ever seen it, sort of backfire?
Yeah. So the reason why I say like having the necessary justification is super important because I've been in those gray area positions where I mean, look at it in your own sphere, right? A lot of times we're in positions because we've done the prerequisite, but that doesn't mean we always know all the answers, right? And that's why I constantly say like leverage the network of experience you have around you to make up for that. That's why having a relationship with your first time is important. That's why having open streams of communication with your subordinates is important because I don't know everything, right? If I'm the boss, I just got to be in charge of making decisions, but I need everyone's buy-in so that you also feel supported, right? Like, do you want to show up every day and just be told what to do, or do you want to show up every day and be a contributing member of the team that's helping solve all the problems? It's a little bit different of a mindset. So I had and I talk about this a lot in my book because it was something that was profound to me when I kind of realized this, right? If you look in your, spheres, look at like the things people say when it regards social or organizational normatives or like what's expected, right? A lot of people will tell you, hey, you can't do this. And it's like, well, why? A lot of the reasonings is because I'm aware that you can't. We've never done it that way. It takes a lot of work. It might look bad, whatever the reason might be. So I had a really awesome boss when we were doing initial counseling is when I became a company commander in the SFAB. He was like, look, you're going to be stepping into a position that like you don't have the requisite experience for. Like a post KD major, has been in the Army 15 years or so and has done a lot more than I did at that point. Now, luckily, I had some, I was a company commander already to 2 big training rotations. I had some experience. So like I knew that if I applied myself and if I established trust with the people I needed to, I'd be able to do okay. We'd be fine. Right. But I remember he pitched me something that like has stuck with me to this day. And I wrote a lot about it because it's super important. He told me, hey, look, part of your job as a leader is to know the operational environment you find yourself in. So I call it the box, right, in the book. Basically, and again, we'll take this very niche thing. It applies to all industries, but, in the Army, right? So we have laws. We have federal laws. We have state laws. We have local municipalities, things like that. Those apply to everyone. So that right there is a pretty big box. These are all the things you can't do. Here's some things you have to do, whatever. And then we have on top of that, right? So if you're an infantry officer, you follow certain guidelines. We were at Fort Bragg, which is a certain type of post that has its own specific rules. We were in the SFAB. So the SFAB fell under certain, the SFAB had its guiding policy and doctrine. The brigade had its version of what it wanted you to do, the battalion, So he's like, by the time it gets to you, you got all these things that are telling you what you can't do, maybe some things you can do. You got ranges, you got range policy, you got AR 670-1, you got 6-22, 3-0, 3 wow. So basically he said your job as a leader is to know all this because what you'll find is if you actually start to grill some people actually might not know why they do some things. They just know it's acceptable. And so he taught me like, no, look at that boundary, find it and map it out for yourself. So I know I can go, here's the edge right here. I can operate right here. And then he challenged me. He's like, always operate on the edge. He's like, that's how you'll be able to be like a profound leader who's able to do things that are innovative and creative. Because if you actually understand true limitations that are kind of, put on you, you can make informed decisions against that, right? Like gravity is a thing we all accept as a reality. So I know that's not going to change. Fort Bragg's specific policy on how a certain range goes will tell me how I can or cannot do things. But that means that in that space, in that gray area, again, I know I can leverage certain things. And then it just becomes not a matter of can we do it? It becomes a matter of should we do it? And that's where risk kind of comes into play. And he was like, that's your next job as a leader is once you know your environment and you've mapped out what's not possible and what is preferred based on all these things that you operate under, he said, then it's a matter of weighing risks. And if you can look at the risks and you can say, hey, I'm minimizing the risks this way, and here's the benefit we're getting that way, he's like, you'll have, all the justification you could ever want. And so I was like, wow, this is insane. What a brilliant way of kind of thinking. And so I took it and I ran with it. And much to his dismay, not some, 3 months later, I remember he calls me up to his office and he goes, hey, did you guys run a range recently? And I said, yes. And he goes, was it an M4 pistol range? I said, yep. He said, did you guys do it in civilians? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, walk me through your justification for that. Because again, this is something I had briefed him. I briefed him at training meetings. I've been talking about it. It's not like I was hiding it. He hadn't picked up on it. So then someone had brought it to his attention that like, hey, we did this thing. And so again, I explained to him, hey, sir, I used your methodology. I looked at all the rules and I looked at all the regulations. And actually what I found was that the range SOP is excellent. We have to have our helmet on. We don't have to actually shoot in body armor. So we can shoot. We just have to have our helmet on. We submitted the proper, memorandum that said we were going to be doing this range without the body armor. And we told them we were going to be shooting civilian clothes. Luckily, SF is there, other units are there. So this isn't like for the Fort Bragg range isms. This made sense. And then I said, and sir, I'm just operating on your training guidance. And he was like, well, walk me through that. And so I said, well, we were on the SFAB. We were training for a variety of situations. And one of the kind of things that we were training is like, non-standard shooting, like shooting in civilians, different kind of methodologies. Because again, we could be working with police forces. We could be working with, when I was in Tunisia, I was working with, their version of SF and their version of like top tier units. So I told him, I said, it makes sense. It's something that you've been kind of telling us to do, if you will. And so using kind of like, hey, legal, moral, ethical, it was legal. It made sense morally and it made sense ethically based on the training guidelines. And so I let him know, I gave him all the justification and he kind of like smirked a little and laughed. And he's like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. He goes, maybe let's not do that again though. It is very risky. It does have certain perception risk too. He's like, so I'm glad you did the training. It makes sense. But he's like, but let's just not do that again in the future. And so what I got from that was that like, hey, I'm not very happy you did this thing. But truthfully, he did tell me I could. He didn't pay attention to the details. And so I kind of kept that in my mind. And I don't know if you remember, do you remember our live fire event that we did?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that live fire, the reason we did it that certain way is because I knew I could justify it. Right. And I remember because I was getting guidance that we were going to do platoon live fires. And even though I said this doesn't make sense, this isn't actually what we need to do. I think that we're maybe misinterpreting it. And they were messing around with it so much that by the time, we were like the week prior, they're like, hey, you don't need to do platoon live fires. We've confirmed that. And I'm like, well, I already have everything laid on for this platoon live fires. And so they're like, well, you don't have to do it. So just do section. And so then that's why I came to you guys and I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 2 section live fires. And I basically said, we're just going to have 2 section live fire lanes running concurrently. And you guys are going to get the added benefit of what it would be like to operate as a platoon. But we're not doing anything wrong because we're doing section live fires. And, and we did the training event and everyone thought it was a great opportunity. And I had no issues that I had to justify because I followed the training guide.
Yeah, I totally remember all of that. Hearing all of this again, I think this is something we try to push on the cadets as well. I guess another part of that is you said risk. We all use this deliberate risk assessment, but what are some other ways you've thought of managing risk?
Wow.
So, looking at it, a live fire is a live fire. So is it basically just understanding, okay, this is generally what goes wrong in a live fire, basically?
Yeah. So the like deliberate risk assessment worksheet, again, something got really, he nailed it on the head. It does get like used in very lazy formats. Like, hey, we got to do an M4 range. Who did the last draw for an M4 range? It gets kind of like, people look at it as like a problem when, again, like, yes, redoing a draw is kind of annoying. It does take a lot of time. So like, let's reuse it. But the point is still very important. Like you still got to look at the thing because what the draw kind of does is it helps you look at the risk associated with the training. So like with a live fire event, for example, I think we can all agree that like we want to train for war. We got to prepare for war. I don't think anyone would really agree that like we should have any kind of injuries or death because of training for war, right? So we've come up with this paradigm where it's like, as we get more realistic, as like realism increases, the danger to ourselves and others increases, right? So we need to mitigate that somehow. And so that's what a deliberate risk assessment really teaches you to do, is it teaches you to look at the specific risks of a training environment. And so like with our 2-section live fire, for example, the reason why I had zero concerns was because where the way that everything was taught and the way that everything was arranged was that I knew that you guys, unless you deliberately did something intentional that was unsafe, you were all in positions where you're in up armored vehicles and you're shooting at things that are outside of, the surface danger zones and any kind of threats like that. So that's kind of the draw. And for the cadets, like, it's super huge to know that, like, this is going to be the draw gives you the permission that your boss needs to say, I accept the risk that you're willing to take. You can go a step further and do kind of like what we've already talked about. You can invest in your people and in your organization, and you'll have, I call it return on leadership investing, right? You'll have marginal incremental benefits the more attention and energy you give to your people. That's why I spent a lot of time with you guys, the lieutenants, for example, right? I would bring you guys in constantly and I would give you problems to solve. I would give you fake scenarios to plan against. I would give you different things because I was investing energy into you to make you more capable and more competent, so that, like, when we were going out and doing things like, JRTC, if I told you, you got this mission, you're going to go link in with the brigade, blah, 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 and you're going to go do these great things. All the work we had done up to that point had allowed me to invest a certain amount of trust in you in that moment so that you'd be set up for the most success possible. And so that's another way that, like, that doesn't get taught about, that doesn't get kind of addressed, is that, like, you can minimize risks even before the incident comes into play. How are you training? How are you interacting with people? Like, what are you putting into your organization that's going to increase the baseline level of expertise from where it is to where you need it to be? And I've seen this in my career like a few different times. The benefit of, like, being an officer is they give you a lot of different experiences so that you can see different pictures, right? With our NCO counterparts, our enlisted counterparts, they want the opposite. They try and keep them in places for longer for that continuity piece. But I've seen organizations that when you walk into the organization, you can kind of get a feel for what's the baseline performance here with this thing, right? And then from that, you can then make decisions. Like when we did do you remember the marathon ruck?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that was an incredibly challenging event, right? I had a lot of personal issues with it because I think it probably put a lot of harm on people that we didn't need, and I don't think we trained up for it correctly. But we'll use that as an example, right? I remember they wanted to do this thing. Our boss really wanted to do it, and to his credit, it was a challenging thing. I think he wanted to do it more so that he could just tell everyone that we did it. I don't love that as much, but okay, so we're being made to do this. This is not going to be like a pleasant thing. And then they were like, well, we need to train up for it and blah, blah, blah. And so I looked at this and I was like, listen, this is a non-standard training event. It truthfully means nothing if we do it the way that someone expects us to, or if we just try it, right? So I looked at it kind of different. I was like, I don't really care about the event. I care about getting through the event with, like, minimizing the risk to everybody. And so what I did that was different was that, the other companies, they did like a 12-miler, they did like a 16-miler, and they were giving their feedback. They were like, it takes a lot of time, and people are getting injuries from it. And so I kind of took all that, and I made a calculated risk decision. I was like, I'm not going to make you guys, like, increase your rucking any more than I've already had you do. I think I made it pretty clear that, like, your PT schedules were on you. I had each of you submit me, your individual training plans, and I looked through them, and I assumed that even if you only attacked this at like 70% solution, I knew that, like, I was giving you we did PT from 6 to 8. And then in the afternoon, I incentivized, doing lunch PT or going home early to go do more. So I knew that the majority of you guys were getting a decent amount of time allocated to work out. And I knew that the majority of you were actually doing that. Obviously, we had some incidences where some platoons maybe were a little lazier than others. That's natural. But again, I'm not going to punish the group because of the failure of a few, right? I'm just going to have you guys police each other up. And so when we went to go do that event, I knew that we weren't in, like, stellar marathon ruck mode shape, but I knew that we could all do the event. And since it was a one-time event, if we did it the right way, it would reduce everyone's risk of injury and we can get through it. And so I don't know if you remember, but the day we decided that we were going to do this event, the battalion changed its policy and they were like, everyone can do it. It's on your own, go at your own pace. And I looked at you guys and I said, we are not doing that. The last thing on planet Earth I want is 82 of my people going off individually or in small groups who have no frame of reference for moving this far, because a lot of people didn't. We don't typically go that far. 12 miles is our standard, and we're going over double that. I looked at you and I brought you all in, And I said, we're going to do this together. If you are struggling, you need to communicate it so that someone can pick you up and pick your stuff up, and we're going to get through this. And so that's what we did. And we moved at the right pace. It sucked, but we got everyone through it. And I don't know if you remember, but we were one of the only companies that had the highest success rate and the time
Exactly. Yeah. I do remember that, which is very interesting. I mean, because we did submit our PT plan through H2F and got it all blessed off so that we were preparing for it, but we weren't doing an insane amount of rucking before.
Exactly. And so that's kind of like, again, that was like a risk decision, right? So I knew I had been investing in you guys to a certain degree, so that when it came to it, I knew that it was going to suck a little more than I feel like maybe we did a long ruck march or two. But I mean, I remember the other companies, they did it like a couple weeks before, and I was like, man, imagine if there were like little injuries that happened from that. I was like, I'm just going to get us through this. It's going to suck. We're going to go really slow and try and mitigate the risk. And we only had I think 4 people get injured, and it was really minor stuff versus, I don't know if you remember walking through that route. It was just like man down, woman down, man down, people just getting cut because they couldn't make it.
Right. But it also says something like keeping everybody together versus going dispersed. I feel like you do it because it was pitch black out there. So as soon as you left into the training areas, it was really hard to just see who was even around you. But because we kept the company together, it was easy to get through it. Everybody I'm not going to, my sergeant's right next to me. I'm not going to fall out because of that either.
Exactly. And that was what I wanted to leverage, was that we were at that point in time, we were very cohesive. And so I wanted to leverage that cohesion against this problem and to kind of demonstrate to you guys that look, we together can do anything. It may just suck more because obviously we're being asked to do something that's miserable versus I'm watching oh, I'm gonna take off and I'm gonna go. And then I remember not an hour later, it's like we passed them on the side of the road because they didn't have any frame of reference for 26.2 miles. That's a long time. And we've never done that. So, and I don't even remember what our time was, but it was pretty bad. But I remember what I did was I allowed you guys to give me input. Hey, sir, we got to slow down a little bit. Hey, this is going on. It's all right. Towards the end, we were taking a little more breaks than I wanted. But again, the point was I wanted to keep us together because I knew that shit sucked, but we were going to do it together. That was super incredible.
Definitely. Well, from operating in the gray zone to here, I mean, do you have anything you'd like to offer the cadets out of this to help them when they run into these problems?
Yeah. So we've talked about it previously, take this time now to really know what you're talking about and really learn the things you have no frames of reference for. What helped me my whole career was not just taking someone's opinion at face value. You can't do that. That's never been done. Or you can't do that. That's not the way that we do things, right? Take the time you have, that return on leadership investing, invest in yourself first. Because if you know what you're talking about and you know how the rule specifically works, that's going to be a lot of value that you're going to bring to an organization that's going to be revered, respected, and required versus trying to have a justification that's based on something that's a little bit less credible, like the way you feel, the way you think. It's no. What do the rules say? What does the organization want done, or how can I go about doing it? And then it's well, this is what I'm going to do, and here's why I'm going to do it. So that way, then if something doesn't go the way that's planned, you have the justification for it. And now is the perfect time to build those reps. Learn the paradigms of the problems that you're going to be facing now and invest in yourself, because eventually you're going to be in a position where you don't have any more time to put towards yourself. You don't have any more time to study things. You don't have any more time. It's people need you. You have to solve problems right now. So it's how well do you know what you're talking about, and how well can you look into what it is that you need to know? Because again, knowledge is either knowing or knowing where to find, right? And so that's what I would offer, is that have that justification. And don't be afraid to operate in the gray zone. If you ever step outside the boundaries that you think of an environment that you're in, you have to have that kind of understanding of where you're operating so that if something does happen, you can justify it. And likewise, we did PT from 6 to 8. You'll probably never do that again. But we were able to do it because there's no rule against it. There was no rule that said that you could not start early. There was no rule that said that PT had to start at 6:30. The standard was 6:30 to 8. And so I took that and I said, okay, we're going to start a little earlier, 6. There's no reason I can't. And so when I had people come to me and they're like, you guys working out at 6? I'm like, yeah. They're like, it was just different. There was nothing against it. So when you do that, you'll be able to be very creative. You'll be able to be very innovative, and you'll be truly a better leader because you'll be able to help either your subordinates with their problems, or you'll be able to help your boss with theirs. Very frequently, I've helped my bosses over the years with problem solving because I've taken that standard of like define the problem and then like figure out a solution that's on the edge of that problem to where you can get away with what you need to get away with and get the job done. Don't get hung up on the semantics. Don't get hung up on it hasn't been done before. That's not how we do it. It's like challenge people, create a culture where you challenge things based on justifications. That was the biggest thing. If you remember, whenever you guys would propose plans, it's like, you want to do what? And then what's the justification? How do we know that that's going to work, not work, And when you can do that, make it impossible for your boss to say no. Make it very easy for them to say yes. And that's kind of what we don't teach, I think, young officers as much, is that like, give me the feedback, get me to where I need to be. Like, when I give you guys a problem, I'm like, hey, this is the problem. We got to do this range. You guys go do the work. You come back to me and you say, this is how we get to yes. So that's what I would offer. Use the time you have now, invest it in yourself, and then understand that like every decision you make is you investing in your people and your organization. It's just envision 6, 12, 18 months from now, where do you want to be and where are you going based on that? And you'll be able to make more informed decisions. And people are going to respect you for a lot more than your position or a lot more than your resume. They're going to respect you for who you are and your character, in the moment.
Definitely. Again, Captain Rodino, thank you so much for all the information and wisdom. It's something that you only get it from experience, and you only have so much time. So you got to leverage everybody in your life to, coordinates to learn that. We really appreciate it, sir.
Heck yeah, Mike. I'm happy to help. Like I said, this is the legacy that I want to leave now. Is I want to invest in those that are doing the job that I did, give back a little bit. So, and the book's coming out soon, so we'll have plenty to talk about once it's out.